Our special guest today, Strombo, one of the greatest broadcasters and interviewers this country has produced. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Very excited to have today's guest on. He hails from Toronto, well, actually Malton. He's a former sports radio reporter, producer, and host at The Fan. He was host of Live in Toronto at The Edge. He was host at MuchMusic. He was host of The Hour and George Stroumboulopoulos Tonight on CBC. Host of Stroumboulopoulos on CNN. Host of Hockey Night in Canada. Host of House of Strombo. An 11-time Gemini and Canadian Screen Award winner, the man they call Strombo, George Stroumboulopoulos. Welcome to the program, George. Great to have you here, my friend.
No, it's really good to see you, Swiss. How you been, buddy?
I've been doing pretty good. You know, living in Mexico for the last little while in the winter. It's a good place to winter. I have to tell you, it's pretty awesome. And you being in LA, I think you can relate to having nice winters.
Absolutely. I can. Yeah. Right on, man. I'm really glad to be here with you on the show.
You know, I know that reading your bio and everything else, your parents were Egyptian and Ukrainian, which is kind of interesting. I'm half Ukrainian on my mother's side as well. And my wife and I were in Egypt this past fall, which is kind of a cool coincidence. Tell me about your childhood.
You know, my dad's a Greek Egyptian. Raised. I think they were very much ethnically Greek. My mom being Ukrainian, but I was raised by my mom. So I was raised in Jane and Wilson, Rexdale, and Malton, all on the west side of the Toronto area, most of my life. So definitely raised by my mom, really tight-knit Ukrainian family, immigrant family, very much the immigrant experience in Toronto. You know, I've traveled all across this world and all across this country, and there's something very unique about the Toronto immigrant experience. Certainly the wave of immigration back when my folks came through. So, just like a regular kid, dude, didn't like school, didn't like to do anything. I was, particularly lazy. I was interested in music and film, never thought I could do anything in that space, loved sports, had no athletic ability, didn't think I could do anything in that space. So I just kind of was one of those kids that didn't really care that much. And I was engaged in the world, but wasn't really engaged in any particular plan or path. Thought I might end up being a filmmaker when I was a teenager, but then had no idea how to go about doing that. So I just kind of weirdly stumbled into this career as a broadcaster when I was about 18, 19 years old. And when you posted all the stuff that I've been able to be a part of in my career, I kind of forget the run that I've had. I kind of forget all the things I've been able to do over the years and been so grateful to be a part of it. But yeah, for a kid who has worked on an illegal pirate radio station in Rexdale back in the day, it's quite a trip.
From a legal pirate radio station in Rexdale to all over the world, really. So tell me, how did having the single parent really experience from your mom in the ethnic background, how did that mold who you were?
I grew up never believing in institutions, but hoping for better from institutions. So I think my parents had come to Canada from places that were not as good for them as Canada was going to offer them. And Canada offered quite a bit. But when you get to Canada, the dream isn't the reality, right? So you got to get out there and you got to slug it out. So I learned very, very early, not by any words or vocal lessons my mom would have taught me, but I just learned by watching what her experience was like, and my uncle and my aunt, my grandmother. I saw what their experience was like, and it was hard, growing up way below the poverty line, dead broke, like just going for it. And so I knew from the very beginning that the country that everybody talked about wasn't the country that I was experiencing. But that didn't mean that I couldn't do my part to help make it that, help maybe move the conversations forward. So I'm very much informed by that, no matter what my career has done, where I've gone, how privileged or not. I've always understood that there's only actions, and those actions are your only hope, because the system in practice is not there for you, generally speaking. So I'm still that guy. No matter where I go, I'm still that guy, and I'm sure you are too, Joe, Liz, that as far as you travel, you're still connected to the roots. And I think when you're growing up immigrant ethnic kid in Toronto, you're never very far from your ethnicity.
How was your mom at being the mom-dad combo? I mean, you're one of millions of kids, in Canada who were raised by a single parent. Talk about that, the role that your mom played there, and how she was able to handle it.
I don't know how she did it, if I'm being honest. I don't know how she did it. No education, traditional education, lots from the school of life for sure. Like I said, below the poverty line. My mom's work ethic and her will, pretty world class. You know that great Tragically Hip line, armed with will and determination and grace too? That sums up my mother. So I watched her live and lead, and I am still amazed today at what she pulled off. I really am still amazed today at what she pulled off. She kept our family together. She taught us really good, my sister Natasha and I, really good lessons about how to live, what to expect, but moreover, how to go get it, but not to go get it at the expense of everything else. Don't lose your soul in the pursuit of your goals. My goals really weren't even that important, to be honest with you. I don't remember them ever asking me, my family asking me what I was going to do for a living. It didn't matter. The kind of person you were mattered more than what you did, because it was just assumed we would get jobs. That's it. We don't have careers. We have jobs in our life, in our families. So I just watched her ability to push through everything, to never complain about her situation, even though she was well within her rights to. And I think that kind of work ethic and that toughness was instilled in me at a very young age. And to this day, my mother is harder to reach than I am. My mother is still working. Like, she retired a long time ago, but my mom is a guerrilla missionary, essentially. She helps when refugees come to Canada, she helps set them up, but she does it for no money. She does it out of the goodness of her heart, and she's living her values. So to this day, my mother impresses me. It's kind of shocking what she's been able to do. And so, yeah, that's my entire DNA, Joe. There's nothing about me that is this person if it's not the influence of my mother. Like, there's nothing about me that isn't influenced. Now, listen, she's a Christian. She's different kind of politics than I have. All that's different. But the core values of why you do what you do and how you do it, that's still with me.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, having a father who left when you were relatively young, of 7, 8 years old, I think it was, and I know, like, I've got abandonment issues. I never had parents that left. I mean, my parents stayed together and all that stuff, but there was some chaos in the home, of course, as well. But what's that? Do you have any abandonment issues? Did that lead to anything? Did you ever, suffer from that kind of problem?
I don't think so. I don't feel it, anything like that. What I am is fiercely loyal. I'm fiercely loyal. And if I get a sense of disloyalty, I can be pretty cutting and tough, right? And I suspect that's from my childhood, if I'm being honest. I suspect watching who was good to my mom and who wasn't really taught me to draw a line in the sand. And I understand now, in our modern conversation, everybody's being more open and all that stuff. They say don't abandon people, abandon behavior, or don't cut off people, cut off behavior. But I'm still pretty hardcore and pretty gangster about it, about loyalty. And I don't have much time for disloyalty. And I can be ferocious if somebody is disloyal to me in a meaningful way, right? And I think I learned that from my mom. Learned that from watching how she was treated. Yeah, my dad, I think, was 7 when he split. And I don't have any ill will towards him. There's none of that. I mean, my dad was young. They were like, my parents were teenagers when they got pregnant, right? So how am I going to be mad at them, my dad, for leaving when he was also a kid. So I harbor no resentment towards him whatsoever. My mom was very clear in that, making sure I grew up with, she even said to me, you're not growing up with daddy issues, right? She said, you're not. It doesn't matter that, she said, it doesn't matter that he's gone. It doesn't matter that he's gone. Here's what you have. Nothing else was promised to you. This is what we're going to do. Don't have a grudge. There's no point. Let's make a good life for ourselves. So my mom taught me very early, or at least helped me understand, that I wasn't going to grow up with any of those kind of issues. But like I said, if someone's messing with us, I can be this. There's a side of me that people don't ever really see unless you really are that way. You really cross the line, and I can be pretty cold in that respect. And I bet you that's what it's from. I haven't really thought about that, but I'm telling you for the first time, I bet you that's what it's from. is that my real desire for loyalty, and not blind loyalty. Like if I'm being an idiot, don't be loyal to me. But you know what I mean? Like that real old school loyalty. If that's not there, I'm moving on. And I think I learned that from my childhood.
What made you think you'd be a good broadcaster? I think our paths first crossed like 100 years ago. You were working at the Fan at the time, producing, I think, and I was on a show you were doing there when we first met. And, how did you get into that realm?
Before I answer that, I got to say, you were this broadcast legend, right? We knew who you were. We loved what you did on TV. And when I got to meet you, and that us young producers and engineers at the Fan got to meet you, everybody said the same thing as Joe is so nice. You are so kind and gracious to everybody. You were so kind and gracious to the kids that no one knew our names. They didn't give a shit about us, right? But you were really, really gracious to us, and not in a fake, ingratiating way. You were just a real dude. I'll never forget. And I was telling somebody the other day, my friend Bob Makowitz, who was on TSN radio, I was saying, I'm going to do Swiss's podcast. And without missing a beat, he goes, man, Joe is so nice. And but he remembers that from when we were in our 20s, early 20s working at the Fan. Now we're in our 50s, right? So we think so highly of you. You treated people so well back then. So I wanted to say that. And I'm grateful to be here with you. But in those early days, I never thought I was going to be a broadcaster. No, it's true. I never thought I was going to be a broadcaster. It didn't even occur to me that you could do this for a living. I didn't know how one would go about doing it. So I was a movie theater usher at a theater, a Cineplex in Rexdale called the Woodbine Center. And I just thought, maybe I'll work here. Maybe I'll become an assistant manager. I had a very non-glamorous stint in the Canadian Reserves. I didn't really have a plan or a path. And to be honest with you, I never really thought of it. I wasn't going to go to university because I knew there was no way I could afford university. Like that was never even a prospect. I knew the only time I was ever going to be on a university campus is if my friends were there and I would go party with them. I was never going to go to university. And no one ever expected me to in my family. And then one day I was a teenager and I thought I'm going to go get my motorcycle license. And right beside the movie theater was an adult learning center for Humber College. And the motorcycle license was in the parking lot of Humber College. So you had to go pay there. It was $200. And I think I was making $4.50 an hour, right? $4.50 an hour at the time. So I saved up my money to go get this motorcycle license. And there was a woman who worked there who was way out of my league, but I was sweet on her. So I would go hang around with her from time to time. And I think she developed a fondness for me. And she said, here, take this course calendar. You never know what's going to be in there. Take a look at it. And it was my motorcycle course. And I flipped the pages and I saw radio. And I thought, I'll do that. And swear, Joe, that's it. Like, that's it. I just went, I'll do that. I grew up listening to radio, loving radio, wishing I could do radio, but it never occurred to me, like I said, that you could. So I didn't realize that you can go to school for this. And so I just kept working and saved up money to pay my tuition, which I think was $900 at Humber College for radio. And that's how it happened. And I didn't really try that hard in school for the first 6 months. And something around the halfway point, maybe not 6 months, like 5, whatever the halfway point is of my first year, it occurred to me that I should try. I said, why don't you just try? And I don't know where that came from. I don't know. No one said to me, you should try. No one took an active interest in my education. Most of the teachers at college, I was pretty much a loudmouth, so they weren't overly invested in me, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't have been. And I had a couple of hard teachers that a lot of the other classmates didn't like, but something about their straightforward, no bullshit approach, and they were like tough. They used tough language. They were tough on me, and it worked. It just occurred to me, I went, I think these guys are neat. I'm pretty tough. Why don't I just toughen up in school? That's what I did. I just toughened up and decided to do the work. And somehow this happened, right? I took an internship out in Kelowna at a music radio station. I had already done the pirate radio station in Rexdale. And I thought, let's see what happens. And that's how it went. That's kind of how it went. But I never really thought I could do it. I never doubted I could do it. I just didn't think there was a way to do it, right? And that's how I kind of set on this path.
Your first paid gig in Kelowna. Let's talk about the Lizard.
Mm-hmm. What a job! It wasn't paid until I took the shitty job that nobody wanted. Right? I went there as an intern, no money, like broke, dude. I would only fill my car gasoline $5 at a time because I knew that it would be less weight in the car and I could get a little further on $5 than I could have. I couldn't even afford to fill up my gas tank. Like it was one of those kind of, back in the night, early night, no money. There's no chance. I was so lucky that when I was there, McDonald's had a 2 Big Macs for $2 deal for a month. So every day I would buy 2 Big Macs for $2 and I would put one in the fridge. How gross is that? And I would eat one for breakfast and one for dinner. Like broke. I was living honestly on $3-4 a day is what I was living on. And it was money I'd save from the movie theater. I think everybody there really liked me, or at least they treated me like they liked me at the radio station. They loved my work ethic. And they were looking to throw me a bone and pay me. But what they offered me was the job that nobody else wanted in the spring and summer, which was to be the mascot of the radio station, which was a giant lizard. And it was one of those old, janky lizard costumes, like those big, clunky ones. And they paid me $10 an hour. And I did it for like 3-4 hours a week, that job. So I made $40, $50 a week doing that job, which changed my life. $50 a week completely changed my life because I could actually eat a slice of pizza on top of the Big Macs. I could do that kind of thing. I could buy booze. Back then I was still drinking and I really enjoyed it. So I was like, oh my God, I could go buy a Mickey for this. I could go do anything for this. But I got the job. And what I think the radio station saw in me at the time was, I loved a lot of music. So I was assisting in the music department, helping them pick songs, giving them the young person's perspective on songs, doing a metal show, like a Monday night metal show called High Voltage, and being the mascot. And whenever they asked me to do something, I said yes. I said yes to everything. I would dress up in this mascot costume, drive this beat up old, I don't know if it was a Pontiac Parisienne, but it was like a custom convertible where they just like sheared the roof off. And I would drive this convertible, put on the mascot costume, and hand out tickets to concerts. I did everything. And I got to be honest with you, I loved it. I loved that job, man. And right around that time, a few months into that job, our friend Barry Davis, who went on to have an illustrious career as a broadcaster himself, I had gone to Humber College with him. Barry was working at the Fan as a board op, and they were looking to hire somebody else. And he had mentioned to this guy, Rick Hart, said, oh, my friend George is living in Kelowna, would love to come back to Toronto. He'll do the board op job. And I got that job. Rick called me. I had a Post-it note on my door saying, call Rick Hart at the Fan. I called. He says, whenever you're back in Toronto, come on in and we'll talk about work. So I hopped in my car, and I drove all the way across Canada, partly into the US, got back to Toronto, met with Rick, and I got the job at the Fan.
I've been to Kelowna, Penticton, spent a lot of time there. My wife and I met in Penticton. It's nice. 42, 43 degrees in the summertime there. I can't imagine wearing a lizard costume in that kind of heat. You earned your $10 an hour, buddy. I remember.
Dude, I don't think it was ever dry cleaned. I don't think it was ever dry cleaned. It was like you get in there, and it was honestly like the smell inside that costume, and you knew you had hours to go. To me, when someone said to me, you got fired from Hockey Night in Canada, but that must suck. I'm like, no, dude, I was a lizard in the summertime. That shit's hard.
In Kelowna. Yeah. Yeah. One of my jobs before I got into the broadcast business is I was a Coke robot. That was
wow.
The Coca-Cola robot. Yeah, that was a fun gig, for sure. Yeah. Coca-Cola robot.
That's amazing.
My name is C63 Ola. How are you? How old are you? I'm 3 years old. Well, you are old enough to be my grandfather.
Did you want to be a broadcaster at that time? Was this you practicing?
Well, you know what? I was the time I was boxing, I was going to school, and I was working part-time in the summers for Coca-Cola. My dad worked for Coke, and I got a job through him and had that connection. And they had an opening. They said, we've got this. They knew drama was my major, and they knew that this is kind of right up my alley. So I drove around in this van and operated the Coke robot at malls, and I even went to a nightclub in Fort McMurray. But I went all across Alberta as a Coke robot.
What?
It was a hoot. Yeah. It was good, man. It was good.
I love that.
You mentioned that you've been sober. I know a long time now, and as have I. What was the turning point for you? What was it that made you say that's enough?
I feel like I heard a great music producer say, I didn't have a problem per se, but I feel like I used up my drink tickets. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel that way. I wrecked myself. You know why, right, Joe? Because this is at this point, I'm working at the Fan. I'm working real hard. Like I'm working 30, 40 hours in a row kind of shifts. Like I was going
Wow.
super hard. But what I was doing was partying the same way that I was. I still hang out with my friends, do my thing. So I just took my regular, like, young man, let's go rip it up kind of good times life. And then I added an unholy amount of work on top of it. And I just felt my body falling apart. Like I kept getting sick. And the other thing that happened was I would listen in the business to the way other people would talk about their colleagues in relation to how drunk they would get at events. And I remember hearing them talk about that thinking, oh, so that's a thing people notice. That's the thing people notice. And I thought, the best thing to do for my career, if I really want to make a go of it, is make sure that no one ever talks about me that way. I was young, and again, I come from this really scrappy situation, as you know. So I had to do anything I could do, everything I could do to make myself an undeniable choice to be hired. So I removed liabilities, and I had wrecked myself pretty good from partying, and I could feel it. So I think it just sort of, the stars aligned where I knew that something was wrong with my health. I knew that I was like reckless as a kid, young man. And then I saw the practical reason, which was, oh, maybe your career will be better if you quit. And that's really what happened to me. A bunch of these things. I'm really, I'm a slow learner. Like it takes me a long time to learn something, but I only need to learn 30 or 40% of it. And then I can hit a home run with that. Right. So it takes me a long time to get it. But once I can see the pitch and I can see the gap in the field, I'm like, I got this. I can put it over the fence here. And that's what I need. And I needed that. I needed those like 3 or 4 things to line up at once. And I'll tell you, I can't even imagine what my life would have been like had I not made that choice.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And it's like, your life is so much better as a result. You don't know how bad it could have been, of course, but as a result, you've had the kind of life that really people would dream to have, right? And it's
this
it's pretty awesome.
upcoming December. So I guess a year away or 8-10 months away will be 29 years since I quit everything. 29 years, which is crazy. It's crazy for me to think it's been that long.
Yeah, pretty awesome. It's 31 years for me. Yeah,
amazing, man.
In May,
amazing.
31 years.
What it says something imagine. Though.
Yeah.
Discipline, right?
Go ahead.
How?
Yeah.
Excuse me, but just it speaks a lot to what discipline means, and you knew this as a fighter, right? That if you really like, you can do everything the right way, and it still may not work out for you because life is a crapshoot in so many respects. There's luck, there's privilege, there's the grace of others, there's just freaky accidents, right? But discipline and work ethic for me went a long way. And I think if I had made those strong discipline choices, I don't think I'd be where I am today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I needed help too. I couldn't get there by myself. I just couldn't. I tried quitting 1,000 times and couldn't do it. But eventually, with help, I was able to get there. So, how do you end up at MuchMusic? That's a transition from a fan.
I'm working at a radio station in Toronto. The Edge. So I was at the Edge.
Ahead,
so from the Fan, I went to the Edge. No problem. So I was at the Edge at this point. I'd left the Fan. I moved on to the Edge, and I was, doing a pretty good thing there. I was interviewing bands every day. I ended up getting the job being the host of a show called Live in Toronto, which was a show that I loved listening to. So I got to play music every day. Storefront studio, audience would come in every day, random. It's Yonge Street. It's a weird place. It's an Eaton Center. It's crazy shit all the time. It was just a really exciting, perfect job for a 24, 25-year-old guy like me, like an edgy punk rock, loves metal, loves rock and roll and hip hop, and being there. So I was doing that job, interviewing people, and the show would be over and I'd go to the radio station. I'd go to the concerts almost every night of the week. And I feel like that was the job I was just going to do forever. And somebody had called me and said, "Hey, do you want to work do you want to talk about MuchMusic? Because there's an opening." And I said, "Nah, I wasn't really, I mean, I didn't grow up watching MuchMusic because I didn't have cable. So it wasn't a part of my life, really. I would see it, on the weekends. If there was like the free weekends that would happen, where if somebody had cable that you could get MuchMusic, we'd go to their house and watch. But they offered me the New Music. And the New Music was a show that I had watched because it was airing on City TV. Again, a very Toronto experience. And I said, sure, I'll meet with them. Yeah, I'll meet with them. And I met with them. And to be honest with you, I didn't think there was much of it. I didn't think they were that into me. I wasn't that into them. I loved my job at the Edge. I couldn't fathom leaving. I wouldn't even know how to leave. I was so grateful for that opportunity. And then one day around Christmas, I was doing a show. I think it was Christmas. Maybe it was the summer. I can't remember. It was the summer. It was around summer. And I was doing a show, and there was this dude, we were on a storefront studio, like I said, and there was this dude hanging around for a couple of hours watching. And at the very end of the night, he said to me, "Hey, I'm David Kynes." And I recognized his name because I knew he ran MuchMusic with Denise Dahlman. "And do you want this job?" And I'm like, "What?" Honestly, I didn't really think about it. So I said, "Sure, yeah, let's meet." So I went and met with him and Denise. And I think one of the first questions Denise asked me in the interview was, "Why do you want to be a VJ at MuchMusic?" And I said to her, "I don't think I do. Like, that's not what it's not what I set out to do." I mean, and she kind of laughed. And I said to her, "Look, I'm not really that interested in, like, I love music so much, and I love music conversations and journalism so much. I don't want to do things that are, not onto my values." And we had a good talk. And then at the end of that, I walked out thinking, well, whatever, and they said, we're talking to a few other people. We'll reach out in a couple of weeks. I said, cool, no problem. Thought nothing of it. I get back to the radio station, The Edge. I get a call that afternoon saying, "You want the job? It's yours." And I went, "Oh shit, I guess that interview went okay." And that's how I got the job. But it's whenever I've stuck true to my values, I've rarely lost. Shows will come and go. You'll get jobs, you'll get hired, you'll get fired. But if I'm sticking to who I think I really want to be and what my values are, it's worked out for me. Generally speaking, not always. And I really felt that way at Much. Much is maybe the best job I ever had in my life. The first couple of years at MuchMusic were probably the most fun, most exciting time of my life.
Well, actually, we have an interview we did with Britney Spears back in the day. Let's roll that, Vic.
The system is designed for you not to survive.
Right.
It's really hard on somebody.
Right.
How do you keep that, or do you keep that, that ability to stay, or do you go home at night and crawl in the fetal position and just break down? How do you keep it together? I don't know.
Honestly, the way I look at what I do, I look at it as my career, not my life. If you understand what I'm saying. I mean, I look at my family, my sister, my boyfriend, and God. That's my life. So I just I don't take myself so seriously like a lot of people do in this business, Just do it and just have fun with it.
What was going on for you, her, and at that time?
I was asked to do the interview, and I said no. I said no to it. She was a big star. David Kynes, again, the boss of the show, said, "Look, there's a Britney Spears press conference. We want you to host it and do an interview." And I said, that's not my thing. I'm not a pop music guy. I never have been. I don't really, nah. It's manufactured. It's not for me. And he said, no. If you're going to be a real interviewer and a real journalist, you got to be able to talk to everybody. And I looked at him and I thought, no, you're totally right. I'm wrong. You're totally right. I should be able to do this. Like I got it right away when he said it. So I went and I did this press conference and sat down to interview Britney. And I could tell, and it wasn't just Britney, by the way. It's like many of the pop stars that would come into MuchMusic at the time. I could just tell how little control they had, or at the very least, a little control, but maybe more nefariously, just how much outside influence was in their life, and it wasn't healthy. And because I was a student of rock and roll, I know what the doctors did to Elvis. I know how people treated Marilyn in the public eye. So I could tell. Just because, again, it comes back to just knowing a little bit of history. You know when you're living in a moment, right? It's funny about that clip that you just played. when that interview went out, and for a few years later, I got a lot of hate from a lot of Britney Spears fans. How dare you? How dare you act like she's not in control? Those same Britney Spears fans are all sharing that interview now going, oh my God, it was like he was warning her, right? Because Britney Spears fans at the time weren't smart enough, or certainly weren't open enough to understand where I was coming from, because I was coming from a perspective of the streets are littered with the bodies of performers who are not protected, who are protected in the wrong way. And so I saw it firsthand. That's why I asked those questions. Man, I was in a bar with Britney Spears one night, and I watched her order an alcoholic drink. She was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched the record rep go get it, come back, and not want to give her the drink, but gave it to somebody superior to her who handed Britney Spears the drink. So, and I looked at the person, I looked at the woman who went and got the drink, and I was like, and she went, like, fuck me, you're too young for this, dude. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like, no, listen,
Mm-hmm.
I was drinking at 14 too, but it wasn't, I had to wait outside a beer store in Malta and pay a guy $5 to go get me a case of X. It was different, you know? And back then they would do it, but I saw what was happening with Britney. I saw what was happening with a lot of those pop stars, and you knew the train was going to crash. You just knew it. And very few survived. Very, very few survived. So that's what was going through my mind at that time. And I remember walking in at an interview, and I said to somebody, I mean, I don't remember the exact words, but I remember saying to my producers, just kind of like, man, that she is not, like, everything was autopilot. You could see her face when I started to push that question. She kind of went, she was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
What am I supposed to do with this question?
Mm-hmm.
You know, to her credit, she had an answer. But yeah, you could see back then. And again, it comes back to just, and maybe, you know, Joe, and I think it's the same for you, because I've known you a long time, that you have to genuinely be interested in the well-being of the people you're around. And I was interested in Britney's well-being. I didn't want her to be a casualty. I didn't want her to be a casualty at all. You know, so I just said, instead of fucking hiding from it, I'm just going to ask her, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was good.
Yeah.
I mean, really good. She wasn't getting the protection from people who were there, who should have been there to protect her.
100%.
You mentioned, you speak very highly of MuchMusic, and what's the significance of MuchMusic? It was a pretty special place from from the way you talk about it.
You know, I remember many, many times, certainly in the early days of Much with David and Denise, many, many times, conversations being had, choices being made with the well-being of the audience in mind. Like actually saying, you know what, if we're going to play this hypersexual video, if we're going to play it, and we know our audience is young, it's our responsibility to talk about the images, talk about what it means, talk about its impact on young girls or young boys. You know, we were talking about two-spirit kids and trans kids over 20 years ago. Over 20 years ago, I remember doing the New Music and interviewing people where that was their story. And Much in the early days when I was there, was very intentional about doing the right thing, but not being Puritans. We would broach difficult. There was a show called Too Much for Much, and another show called Much Talks, where we had very honest conversations about what was going on. And I just think, you know, in the broadcast world, you rarely get the opportunity to work with a leadership group that cares about that kind of thing as much as MuchMusic did. It certainly changed when I was there. Different management came in and they didn't have the same values. But in those early days, man, Much was really powerful. And you know what else was really powerful, Joe, was it wasn't an on-demand experience. It was a collective experience. So kids would run home, put the show on, adults would run on, put Channel 29 on, and we'd all be watching together. You know, I remember being on the air on 9/11 together. And that kind of thing really mattered. It was a community in every sense of the word. And I think that's part of it. And I've been in this business for like over 30 years now, and I don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like that was.
From MuchMusic, it's on to The Hour, and then George Stroumboulopoulos tonight. Tell us about that transition.
You know, I've been at Much for about 5 years, and I could get the sense that the audience was, or that the management was trying to make a different kind of network, younger, poppier, not so much younger, but poppier and more game shows and stuff that I really wasn't that interested in doing. So I didn't know what I was going to do, to be honest with you. I had met with a couple of people, and then CBC had sort of come along and offered me this show, and but they didn't really have a show. They just sort of offered me a thing. They said, "Hey, do you want to come over and join us?" And I was like, So I turned them down for one show because, yeah, there was just something about it. I was no interest in being a part of it. Then I got offered another show, which is more of a newsy show, which was more interesting to me, but I still turned it down. I decided not to do it. Then they offered me a third show, which was this thing. And they said, just come over and build a talk show with us or something like that. It was a primetime news show. And I didn't really think that CBC was the kind of network that wanted to do that sort of thing. So I also turned them down. I spent most of my career, dude, turning things down. And I finally, it took a long time. It took months and months and many meetings for me to finally decide that I wanted to go over there. Because again, I was very loyal to MuchMusic and I didn't want to go in the way that I was loyal to The Edge, and I really wasn't sure I wanted to go. But when I went to CBC, the idea was come over and start a primetime news talk show live 5 days a week, 4 days a week. Let's go get it. And I thought, this is interesting. I didn't think it was going to work. But in the end, we did 10 years. We did 10 years, which was pretty amazing. And that show and that opportunity gave me so much of what I have today. And I'm so grateful for that.
Well, in October 2012, Hockey Night in Canada celebrated 60 years. And part of that celebration, you had Ron and Don on the show. Let's run some of that.
When I've been there, you should have had it ready. And the guy, I told you about it before.
This isn't Coach's Corner.
Well,
this isn't Coach's Corner.
And hold it. The owners have been saying they don't have any money, and we're into the second month of the lockout. You guys go ahead and talk. I'll play it. Go ahead.
No, but you can tell the story.
Explain the lockout to you while Don finds the picture.
What do you make of this?
It's really simple, George. The owners are saying to the players they don't want to owe you anything. And they're trying to get all the OUs out of the collective bargaining agreement. And if you take all the OUs out, it'd be like Stroumboulopoulos without the OUs. Right. What are you left with? It'd be nothing.
You keep hearing that there is a deal to be made here. Is this just a waiting game now? That the deal? They know what the deal is.
That's a good question for Grapes. What's going on? I give up. I predicted no lockout, and I was wrong. I just think they're shaking them down.
It's very simple. If you want to know what's going on, it's 50-50 now. The owners had, for how many years? 6 years, 43%. The players had 57%. They're at 50-50 now. The reason they're fighting over it, they want to, the players want the original signed, they want to get paid, and the NHL wants to go 50-50. Am I right?
So what's interesting about that is shortly after that happened, about a year or two, Rogers acquired the rights to Hockey Night in Canada, and you ended up on Hockey Night in Canada. I mean, would you have had any premonition at that point that was even in the realm of possibility?
No, no, definitely not. Definitely not. I knew that I loved Hockey Night in Canada and wanted to be a part of Hockey Night in Canada, but I knew that I was never going to change who I was. As a broadcaster. I also, to be honest with you, and I know it sounds a little bit cocky, but it's not. I just thought that Hockey Night in Canada had an opportunity to do a little bit more culturally, right? Be a different kind of broadcast. As you know me because you met me when I worked in sports. Most of the audience didn't know that a big part of my life was sports. And even when I was doing the talk show, I was doing a Leafs TV show on Saturdays. I care deeply about the hockey broadcast and think that HNIC matters. So I never in a million years thought I would do it. Never. So when I got a text message asking if I'd want to meet up, it was in December. I was in Whistler driving back to Vancouver. I was there for a film festival. And I got this note and they were, do you want to meet about hockey? And I thought, oh shit, here we go. Because I knew that not the hockey audience would have come along and did in many respects. But I knew that the traditional cable sports hockey people in TV, they don't want this. They don't really want change. Why would they? Because change is a reflection, they would think, on them, which I don't think it really is, but that's how a lot of people perceived it. So I knew that it wasn't going to work, but I thought, I'm not afraid of anything, so let's give it a shot. I knew I was going to do my part, and that's how it happened.
Right.
And that's how it happened. Yeah.
What do you think worked, and what didn't work, and why? Or why did what worked work?
I think that what I brought to the broadcast is a national, like a CBC federal. Like I had a different relationship with the audience than the cable sports producers did, right? Definitely. I mean, cable sports TV, if you really break it down, you can pick 2 or 3 people who kind of ran both those channels, TSN and Sportsnet, over the years. So you can really pick. It's a really small group of people who have a very similar approach, and I had a very different approach. So when I came over, what they ended up telling me was that the ratings went up with women and people under 30, which was the idea. That was the goal, to grow the audience. Right? The old dudes, the old guard, obviously didn't like change, and a lot of them had a problem with it. Some of the young people had a problem with it. They didn't like what I was doing, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But what was working was that I was actually changing some foundational things to make Hockey Night in Canada, I thought, prepared for the changing conversation in the world, which incidentally happened, the changing conversation, and about inclusivity and all that stuff. And I was working really hard behind the scenes to change some ideas, some values, to get it ready. But at the same time, you get to a place, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but you get to a place and you look around and go, nah, they don't want this. They should want this, but they don't want this, right? And so I knew what was going to work was that my values were true. I was going to be authentic, and I knew that I could interview people, and I could get stuff out of them. I could get stuff out of the players. I could get different things than maybe were being got before. And I know this because I would do interviews, and then the teams would freak out because I got more information that they were comfortable, and then they would call Rogers and ask them to pull the interview down, right? Because I got stuff from them. But I was taking it to a place where it needed to go. I think where it still needs to go. I'm not talking about Hockey Night specifically. I am for me, but in general, I'm talking about where sports broadcasting went, right? Sports broadcasting, you could get a sense, was falling way behind the times from where the culture was going. But I knew this as a music fan and somebody who had all kinds of conversations on CBC with people over the years, where the conversation was going. And I wanted to help sports broadcasting in Canada be ready for that conversation. So I think that's what worked ultimately. The guy that fired me at one point, I think, said recently that I was the right idea at the wrong time. That's what he said, which I thought, no, the right idea but the right idea at the wrong time isn't really a thing. It's, if you know it's the right idea, you just need to have the stomach to stick with it, which they never really did. And then the guy that brought me on ended up leaving a year later. So once he left, I knew that was it. I knew that wasn't going to last.
Right.
But lots of stuff worked.
Well, perhaps
now, oh, by the way, all the people making fun of my suits back then, half the guys on Hockey Night in Canada are wearing the same suits that I wore back then.
Yeah. Well, I got to think that there was a residual effect here from your time, no doubt about it. Now, you leave Hockey Night in Canada, go back to your gig at CBC, and you've done a lot of interviews with various people and various life choices and styles and a lot of sports figures too. One of my favorite interviews was George Chuvalo, who was one of my all-time favorite people, an incredible fighter who went through personal tragedy, some of which I can relate to. Let's roll some of that, Vic.
When you walk down the street, you know that some people who recognize you, they know that story.
Yeah.
So your pain is public.
Right.
And that when they see you, you know that sometimes that's what they think. Is it ever a sensitive subject for you when you know that people know so much about your personal life?
I think in a way it's almost comforting in a crazy kind of way. When people know about it, it's kind of like, then I guess I say to myself some kind of quiet moment. Well, people know about it, and I think they have empathy for me. So that way, So it's kind of like, not that I'm looking for empathy, but it shows, and people sometimes come to me, George, I know you've been through a lot. Well, they don't have to detail what I went through, but they're kind of familiar with it. They know that I lost a good portion of my family, and most people can feel for you that way.
That must have been a difficult interview to do, for sure.
Yeah, the human thing is really important to me, and when I sit down and across from somebody like George, who's had so much loss. I wanted to create a space where you could have a very real conversation, like a very real conversation. And I was grateful that he was willing to go there. And I loved his answers. You know, George is one of the great athletes Canada has ever been lucky enough to call one of their own. And I wanted just people to know that about him. I wanted to know that he is this rounded story, this rounded person with lots to offer. He was funny too. His stuff, he used to come on the old radio show with Spider Jones back in the day, another legend. I've been such a big fan of George, obviously, such a big fan. But yeah, no, it wasn't that it was necessarily difficult, but I took great care with it.
Yeah, and it certainly shows. And yeah, George is a good friend. He's not doing well these days. He suffers from dementia, like a lot of great fighters have had. But I still am in touch with Mitch, and he's he's hanging in there. House of Strombo. What an interesting concept. I can't. It blows me away. You got some of the greatest bands of all time playing in your house. I mean, you had the Cult, right? One of my favorite bands playing in your house. Tell us about the concept and the House of Strombo. How did that come together?
One day I was walking down Yonge Street and I had to make a right onto Queen Street in Toronto, right? So I was walking down Yonge Street and I passed 228 Yonge. 228 Yonge, I think, was now a Home Sense or something, not a Home Sense, but like some home wares house store. It's where I used to do the radio show from, where the kids could come in and hang out. If they didn't want to go home, they could come hang out and meet the rock stars and be around it. I made a right onto Queen Street on the south side and I walked by MuchMusic. And MuchMusic had been like, they no longer did those kind of shows where the audience could, kids could meet and be that close to the people they looked up to, the rock and rollers and the hip hop artists and dance stars and the pop stars. So I walked by it and I thought, man, you two groups, the radio station and the TV station, don't know how important it is to be of your community. You don't know how important it is. You don't care about how important it is to create a space where people can come hang out. And that angered me, to be honest with you, because I remember traveling across the country and seeing the impact we had on kids' lives being in a place like Much or even at the Edge. So I said, all right, screw it. I'm just going to do it at my house. That was it. And I called a friend of mine. I'm like, I'm going to do these shows at my house and I'm going to let the public in and that'll be that. And everybody said, you're crazy. Why would you do that? And I said, because I think it matters. I think you got to create a place where people can bring their families in. They can meet the stars they love, be really close, because there's something really powerful about being in that space. As we get more and more in a digital world, being in that space. And everybody tried to talk me out of it. I said, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. And honestly, I was a little surprised that everybody showed up, that the bands showed up. And people were freaked out. They're like, this is your actual house? Yeah, it's my actual bathroom, my actual kitchen. That's my actual bedroom. Like a house party, you put the coats on a bed. Like I lived in that house. I'd wake up in the morning, dude, go outside like, 8 o'clock in the morning. Some speakers had been set up the night before. I'd go and I'd sweep the front walkway and then my doorbell would ring and it'd be Scott Weiland saying, hey man, can I use your bathroom? I'm like, yeah, no problem. Scott Weiland would come and use the bathroom, whatever. They'd, take a shower. Then the band would show up and they'd come and they would do the show. So like, it was very, very old school in that MuchMusic, the Edge way, where if you remove, and also I thought that, I thought there was something really interesting about having some skin in the game, having some skin in the game. And like anybody can get a studio, but it takes a real G to do it in your home, and let people in. So I kind of did it. That's how it started. And then it kind of grew into what it is.
Well, that's a leap of faith in a lot of different ways. No doubt about that. So you're a guy who's, on side when it comes to cleaning up the environment, human rights, a lot of different things. And you're also the only Canadian who's been named as an official ambassador for the United Nations World Food Program. You recently paid a visit to Syria. What is your role, and tell us why Syria?
Oh, look at that footage. I don't even remember that footage. I remember it, but I don't remember that. They all wanted the high five. Wow. I want to go to places and I want to use the platform that I have to raise awareness and raise money for people in need. I go to places that are difficult places to get into sometimes, complicated places to experience. I have a lot of in internal resolve. So I'm built for difficult things. So I was happy to go there. They asked where we wanted to go. We listed a few countries, 3 that we didn't think we could get in, and one of them was Syria, and Syria came back with a yes. And I'm like, oh my God, we got granted a visa. So we went in there, and it just means a lot to me to do my part. Really, that's what it is, Joe. Do my part to kind of tell as many stories as I can, raise as much money as I can. And, that's the public-facing side. The other side of it is making sure that the World Food Program has, enough stories and video that they can go to countries and try to make sure that countries are keeping up their commitment to helping people around the world. Almost never is a country in a decimated place because of themselves. There's usually a lot of foreign interference. There's a lot of, energy, political, socioeconomic reasons. They're all connected. Why one country is taking something from another country. And so I kind of feel like it's all of our responsibility to help out in any way we can. And that's just a way that I'm able to do it.
What do you think is the most important issue facing Canadians right now?
Poverty, man. And I think that's true around the world. Poverty isn't just the images that people have in their brain from seeing, World Vision commercials, back in the day. Poverty exists in a lot of different ways, a lot of complex ways. And I think if you address the root causes of poverty, you're going to, as a ripple effect, address a lot of other situations. Part of the situation of poverty is not as much access to good food in some places around Canada, many reservations, not access to clean water. Food deserts exist in Canada. And I think if you create a scenario where you can get people out of poverty, and by the way, we can, it's choices by the governments and, just the way that the whole system is set up, that companies get better treatment, corporations get better treatment than the people do. And I think tackling poverty in the Indigenous communities is not the same thing as tackling poverty, in an inner city. It's not the same thing as tackling poverty in rural parts of the country. But there are overlaps. And I think you have to have a very human, very 360 view of how to do this. And I think it benefits everybody, not just physically and emotionally and intellectually, but it benefits your economy. There's no reason not to do it, except that a handful of people, small group, want to hold on to more and give less. That's it. So I think if we tackle the root causes of poverty, look, there are myriad issues that need to be addressed, but to me, that's one that's just it's just so crucial.
Yeah, it seems to me that, kindness is a quality that we can really all have more of, and, love, tolerance, kindness. We can sort of, have a little bit more of that, show a little bit more of that. What a great, and which?
An action, like an accent, putting all those things that we feel and doing something about it.
Okay, so tell us about Apple Music Live. I've got the Strombo app now, the Strombo Show app. Lots of great shows on there. Just listen to your Robert Plant interview, one of my all-time favorites.
Nice.
Tell us about the app venture. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that one, I would now get everybody to go to Apple Music, and on Apple Music, I do a show Monday to Thursday, and also Sundays. But it's called Strombo, and it's in 165 countries around the world. Plus, it is music and conversations. I've had such a great time being a part of the Apple world for the last couple of years, and I really just we just did a whole special. You can find it on Apple Music on our show page. A 2-part celebration of the 50th anniversary of Dark Side of the Moon. It's something. Like, it's a really fun opportunity to be around these great music minds, working with my best friend Bob and the whole team, just telling these stories. We know there's a lot of music out there, and sometimes it's hard to keep up. We like to connect the dots between the songs you already know to the ones you might know or the ones you should know. It's pretty fun. It's really fun. I'm really grateful at this stage of my life to have a show that's, in the most countries I've ever been a part of, just having the best time. I'm very grateful for this career. Absolutely.
And also, if you want to follow George, you can follow George on Twitter and Instagram at Strombo. And George, I want to thank you for taking this time to join us. It's been great catching up, and awesome. Thank you so much.
Dude, so good to see you again, Joe. Really, really happy to be a part of it. Please give your family my love.
All right. Thanks, brother. All right. We'll have more when we come back. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show is brought to you by Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Do you know why that happened? You didn't fix your ball mark. The birds around here are very protective of the course, and when people don't take care of it, this is what happens. It's pretty simple. Just find your mark, fix it, and at least one other. Hey, look at the bright side. We're not up on the northern course. They've got bears and moose. Visit moregolf.ca. You'll find everything a golfer could need, from balls, gloves, clubs, custom fitting opportunities, training gear, valuable accessories, and some great deals. Looking for that perfect gift idea for the golfer in your life? Go to moregolf.ca today. My Costa Swiss pick of the week. I picked Bella Cavella in the 4th race of Mohawk. I also picked her the week before, but she had an early break and wasn't able to pull it off. This time, with James McDonald driving, Bella Cavella pulled away down the stretch, winning the race handily in 1:56 and 3. Rick Moreau, the winning trainer, the 485 trifecta paid $1,795.10. This week, well, guess what? I'm sticking with the winner. Watch for James McDonald and Bella Cavella from post 2 this time in Thursday night's 6th race at Mohawk. I also like the 1, 2, 3 exacta and trifecta box. For all the racing updates, visit Costa TV on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Go to hpibet.com for your wagering options. Joe Tilley Sports is brought to you by COSA, Central Ontario Standardbred Association, providing a united voice for harness horse people racing at Ontario tracks. Check out your benefits today at COSAonline.com and check out COSA TV on Facebook and YouTube for all the latest harness news and live action updates. Live racing year-round. Go to hpibet.com for all your wagering options. Become a member today, and your first bet is free. That's hpibet.com. And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian and local sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcast, and Pocket Cast, as well as the Spanglish Network and Zingo TV. Also, check out the show on YouTube. All of our past great shows and clips are on there. Like and subscribe. It's free. Thanks once again to George Stroumboulopoulos for being on the show. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Do you want to buy or sell a home? Could 31 years of real estate experience help you? Why not speak to an amazing team that loves to overpromise and overdeliver? Aldo has a tremendous team of experts on staff. They are committed to making your next real estate transaction smooth and comfortable. Call 416-GET-ALDO or visit getaldo.com. Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905 686-5678. Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more.